family, love food, the 9th episode in the series, and today what we're going to do is lovely British cottage pie, lovely family favourite, really easy to do. I'm going to show you a simple way of doing it, and hopefully you'll have as good results as I do. So I'll just put up the recipe for you now. Right, let's go through it. Ingredients we've got today, really simple, really cheap, nice and filling, makes a lot of food. So we've got leeks, lovely leeks, really cheap, packed full of lots of vitamins and flavour, great for your kids. Carrots, obviously a staple in any stew that we do, or any kind of wet dish like this, but really good flavour. Onions, again, a lovely thing to have in as a base. Now that's the three that I'm using. If you want to use sweet potatoes, if you want to use swede for example, or parsnip, it's up to you. But I find this combination right for myself. What I'm going to do is when I finish it, not at the start because they'll discolour, just going to add some little petit pois, which is just some small baby sweet peas. You can use normal garden peas, that's absolutely fine. We're just going to add them at the end, just before we add the mash to the top, and keep them nice and green. Start of the show: British beef, locally sourced, lovely beef. What you want to do is go for quite a lean cut, not too lean, but probably a 5 to 10% fat kind of ratio in it, because obviously you need a bit of fat in there for flavour, but we don't want too much fat in there. So that's the core of what we're going to use inside of the cottage pie. We're going to add a few little bits and bobs as we go along, a bit of tomato puree, seasoned as normal, a bit of garlic powder, and some fresh thyme, and then after that we'll do the mashed potato, and we'll go through that and why we've got the eggs there for the mash, and we're just going to finish it off with some lovely Wensleydale cheese, my favourite. So join us in 2 minutes, we'll get to the pan and we'll get started. Right, next what we're going to start doing is getting this meat sealed off. So what we're going to do is we've got a normal sized saucepan, deep sides, so we can mix it without it coming out onto all over the stove. We've already got as potatoes on there. All I've done is just some normal Mary's Piper potatoes, about 8 average sized ones, just diced up and put into some salted water, and we're just going to cook them until tender, until they break apart. That's simple, but we'll go to what we put inside of it later on. So first we'll put it on quite a high heat. I don't like to put too much oil in when we do mince, sorry. It's because you do get quite a bit of fat that comes out of it, even if it is lean mince. So we're just going to take that nice and warm that up. We'll just get some seasonings. Right now, so that oil should be nice and hot. So what we're going to do is get his beef. It's time to smoke. Careful when you add it in, that's why we have this deep sides. You just want to start to break your beef up with a spoon. Move it around the pan. I want to get some nice colour on there. As soon as you put it into your pan, you want to start adding in your seasonings. So be quite generous because it is quite, substantial amount of meat. So we've got about 2 teaspoons there of salt. I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of cracked pepper into there as well. After both of those are in there, what I'm going to do is add some garlic powder, about 1.5, maybe 2 actually, 2 teaspoons there of garlic powder, and just give that a nice mix into there. Make sure you keep moving it around your pan. sure you break up that mince because you don't want it in big clumps. You want it, you know, in nice individual pieces. Right, next thing we need to add is stock cubes. What I like to do when I'm making a beef cottage pie is a stock cube of veg and a stock cube of beef as well. Veg always, it just enhances the veg that you add into it. Just break it up slightly there. Same with your veg one. Wash my hands. So now what we're going to do is just add all that vegetable. So we've got the diced onions, we've got some diced leeks, and we've got some diced carrots, all done really, really easy, peeled and just diced up. So we add all those in together. There's roughly 1 onion there, 1 white onion, 1 leek, and about 4 carrots. I'm going to turn it down a couple of notches now. Now we've got the colour on the beef. And we're just going to get a bit of water from the tap. I'm just going to add that into there. You can hear straight away that you've stopped the frying process. And now what you're wanting to do is just take up all that flavour that you've got on the bottom of the pan. You'll have like, it'll start to stick. That's, as long as you keep stirring, it's not too bad. But all that flavour now, when you put that water in, it will just take that flavour and it'll start to make a lovely, lovely gravy sauce for it. So what we're going to do is put a couple of teaspoons worth of Worcester sauce in there, just to give it a little bit of a kick. There we go. And on top of that, we need to add some tomato puree. So I would say, again, about, I'd say that would be about 4 tablespoons there of tomato puree. Try and get a decent tomato puree, but don't get one with herbs or garlic and stuff like that in just for this purpose. Just go for a straight tomato sauce. Give that a nice stir around in the pan. Make sure everything's incorporated in there. So what we're going to do is just add a little touch more water to it. So it's probably taken about just under a pint of water. Because you've got those stock cubes in, they start to get the flavours going, and you've got that lovely root vegetables and the tomato in there, and your nice season, everything's going to start cooking away nicely. So if you come back in a couple of minutes, we'll let it simmer away. Once it comes up to the next stage, we'll come back and we'll show you how to thicken it and get ready for the next stage. So now it starts to boil. You can see the pan start to boil nicely now. You don't worry about having it on boil, it's absolutely fine, because it'll just break, you start to break your veg down, that's what you want. I've just had that going for about 10-15 minutes on like a little medium to high kind of burst simmer. So you need to have them 10 minutes, because if you don't, when you take your veg out of the oven, they're going to be like bricks, and you don't want that. So next things, like I said, last thing before we thicken it, what we're going to do is I've got some of this lovely thyme that I've just diced up there. That's from the garden. You can just get that from any supermarket. It's absolutely lovely stuff. And we've got there, probably if you're going to get a pack, I'd say we've got about a third of a pack there. You don't want too much, but the reason we're adding it now is because if we add it too early, it'll lose all its flavour and it'll go bitter, and we don't want that inside your sauce. So mix that in. And now, like I said before, granules. Don't be shy of this. It's that, you know, chefs, they've got plenty of time. We make lovely sauces. We take long times to make stocks and things like that. And, you know, we thicken it with different things. But you're at home, you want quick and easy. Just get yourself a nice branded gravy granules that you can find, that you like, and get a chicken one. I know that sounds silly because we're doing beef, but you want the beef to be the show. Now your chicken, usually a slightly sweeter stock, and it'll go nicer with it. Beef stock can be a bit overpowering sometimes, gravy granules. So that's why we've got the stock cube in there for the beefy flavour. So it's instant thick in this. So all we're going to do is just gentle little shake in there, and there's no measured amount. It's just keep mixing it and until it gets to a consistency slightly thicker than you normally would have, because when we cook it, we don't want it to be too wet, otherwise it's going to soak all the way into your potatoes. A bit into your potatoes fine, but you don't want it going absolutely everywhere. So I'll probably take up nearly all of this. So as you can see, look, it's starting to thicken up nice now, and that's what we want, that kind of consistency. It's starting to, you can see how the bubbles are like mud bubbles rather than like a normal water bubble. So there we go, look, see, it's lovely now. So what I'm going to do is just turn that slightly down, and what I want to show you next, the last thing, if you remember, as we said earlier on, is peas. We've got these lovely petit pois or garden pea, and we're just going to add all of those. There's probably about 150-200 grams there. As I say, if you want more or less, it's up to you. If you do get frozen peas, brilliant, absolutely fine, because you know they'll freeze them straight away. Make sure you defrost them before you add them, because that's hot. Peas are ice cold. You're just going to take the temperature that straight down, and you're going to have to put it back in the oven. It's going to have to heat back up. It's going to take a lot longer, so make sure you defrost them first. So they're straight in, which we don't really want to boil it now that we've got these peas in. So what we're going to do is, that's it, that's off now. So what we'll do is we'll come back in a couple of minutes, just as the potatoes are finishing boiling. We'll strain them off and we'll show you how to make the really special crispy mash that we're going to put on top, and how to assemble it all and get it in the oven. So join me in a couple of minutes. Right, so ready to strain the mash, and we'll get this mash made. So make sure there's no kiddies or anybody around. You've got already get your strainer ready before you even think about moving for your mashed potatoes. Turn that one off, so remove that. Just give them a nice shake. You want to try and get the moisture out of it there, and you can see already they're nicely starting to rough up. So we'll get these in there. Should be enough. Right, so first thing, you can use a mashed potato masher, whatever you want. I've got a whisk, a stiff bristled whisk for this one. So all I'm doing is just, I'm not going to bore you by telling you how to mash potatoes, because I know you all know how to mash potatoes, but just trying to break the potatoes down before we start to add anything to it. Because if you add it when it's when they're all solid, it's just going to hit the outside of it. What we want to do is just break it up, and then we can whisk all this nice flavour into it, you see. So I know it's not particularly healthy for you, but we need butter, and you know, don't be shy with butter. This is unsalted butter because we've already got salt, so we're going to put 2 knobs of butter in there, decent sized ones, probably about 50 grams that. and some black pepper. Some good lug of black pepper. The worst thing that people do is think it's under-season the mashed potato. It needs a lot of seasoning. And obviously you need to taste that. So we've got some milk there. Cream works just as well. So about 50 to 75 ml. Always start off with less milk because once it's in, and you can't do anything about it. You know, if you do too much, you can't. You know, you're going to end up with a really horrible mashed potato, and it's going to be too loose to do anything with. So we're just working it round. Now what I'm going to do is add some salt. Again, don't be too tight with salt because it needs a bit of flavour in there. Salt brings out flavour. Obviously, on a balanced diet, so we want a teaspoon of garlic puree there. Just garlic powder. Just gives it a different dimension. Keep beating that up and just try to get as many lumps as you can out. Now some people don't like lumpy mash. We're not in a restaurant at the end of the day. When you're on your Sunday dinner, you might have the odd lump in your mash. It's not at the end of the world as long as you season everything. Because that's where your flavour is. So a little couple of lumps, they're going to roast up nicely in the oven, so it's fine. So what we're just going to do is just get a little bit of a taster. Just needs a bit more pepper in there. A bit more pepper. Just about there for salt, I think. No, just a touch more salt. Touch more salt, and then I'm going to put a little tiny touch more butter in there. So, make sure that's worked in there. Now what I'm going to do might seem a bit weird, but bear with me. What I'm going to do is get an egg, just one, out of the fridge. And it's important that you keep them in the fridge because that's really hot, and you want that egg not to scramble as soon as it hits it. So you could let it cool down, but as soon as you let it cool down it gets too stiff to work with, and you know, you're going to end up with a really difficult kind of thing. So what we do is have a cold egg, so when it hits there it's already cold, so it doesn't scramble as quickly, whereas if you used it at room temperature it'd scramble straight away. So what we're going to do is cold egg, just give it a little whisk to get it started. I'm just going to quickly drizzle that in, and then really fast work your egg in, super fast. Right. And what's going to happen is when you cook that, it's going to give you a lovely, rich, crispy peaks. So that's the mash. We're going to do it now. So we're going to start assembling everything, assembling it all together, and then we can see how it looks. A lot of people they put the mash on top and just spread it. Absolutely fine, not a problem with that. The only thing is you tend to push out the filling, and it's just sometimes if you're in a rush, do it. Not a problem. Just do it how you want to do it. But this way, it's a bit more fancy. It's a bit more. You got your peaks. It's nice and crispy. And what I want to show you is why I do it, because there's a little trick, and this is where the cheese comes in, and a bit more cheeky butter. So let's. I've got a nice lasagna dish, or pot, whatever you want to call it. You can use any like kilner pots, or you can use earthenware ones. Absolutely fine. Just get a pot that's right for you. We don't want to fill this though right to the top, and because again, like I said, it's just going to push out everywhere and it's going to be a nightmare. But don't worry if you get any left, because this is what you do after is you get some of these lovely cheap tin, like takeaway tubs, and what we do is we put on the mashed potato and we don't bake it. We just let them cool down and we freeze them. We freeze them in, so all you have to do is get them out and put them straight in the oven for kids. Really easy, we'll show you that after as well. In fact, what I'll do while I'm here is get some out. This is what we're talking about. So we'll show you a couple of these while we're doing it as well. So just simple foil tins, exactly the same way as you do your other one. Don't fill them right to the top. Again, these are usually, you know, one portion ones, or you know, 1.5 if you've got a couple, or 2 if you've got little toddlers. And again, it's just packed full of flavour. It's packed full of vegetables for your kids. My kids hate vegetables, but they love eating this. So, you know, it's an easy, cheap way of getting it into there, getting them used to eating it, and then you can say to them, you've been eating it for ages, and they're like, oh, we do like it then. So, what we need to do, like I say, I'm showing you with a piping bag today. It's not essential. I've got a little star nozzle in there, just a standard star nozzle. You can buy these from any supermarket, these cheap piping bags, or from eBay or anything like that. So, just get them a little at a time. Obviously, I'm used to really, really, really hot things. So, if you need it to cool down slightly before you start to put it in your piping bag, then do so, because it is quite warm. Right, so all we're going to do is just going to pipe, that's it, pipe straight down. So you have one hand to guide it, and this hand, like that, comes up and grabs it. You just put a little twist in the top, stop it from coming out. You're grabbing it with your finger and your thumb, and you push and you hold the top of the bag like that. This one's to guide, and this is your squeeze hand, not this hand. Forget about squeezing with this hand. This is the one that squeezes, this is the one that guides. So you squeeze and just lift. Squeeze, let go, and lift. And that's all you have to do, and you'll get yourself into a motion. Now, what you need to do is do one side first, and then start the other side. You'll have to fill your bag a few times, unfortunately, but unless you get a bigger piping bag, which I didn't have. I only had my little cake baking ones, what I do with the children, so you have to bear with me for a couple of minutes. So, like I say, straight down, and the reason that we start at the edges and we go to opposite sides is because this pushing down wants to push the mix out. So we go to the edges now, right to the edges, and you can see how the mix wants to push. It wants to push out. So again, all we do now is just repeat the process, and we just follow it side by side until we get right to the middle. So exactly the same as what we did before. Start on this side. And on this side. It looks like it's a bit of work, this, and it is a bit more work than, but you have people around, or you do this for your family, they're going to think you're, you know, professional chef doing all things like this. It's just that bit of extra effort, and it's not taking that long, and the more you do it, the more practice you get, you know, the more you'll get better at it. And that's what it's about, isn't it? This is what this channel's about, teaching you ways of doing things, you know, that you can do, and just makes you feel good about cooking. Sometimes you get a little air hole and just squeeze until the air hole pops out, otherwise you end up spitting it on yourself. So do them little two end bits again, and then we start again. Let's see, it's not taking me that long. And there we go. That's it. So really, really simple. Now this is where the cheese comes in. So what we do with this butter, we just take tiny little bits off like this, just drop them in and over the top like this, just little bits. And what that does is that'll just melt, and it'll just create little pockets of lush little bits of butter. It's just things like that that give you just a little different edge. So, now your cheese. Any cheese you want, yes, you could use any cheese you want. if you want the best cheese, for me it's Wensleydale, because it goes lovely with mash. So you don't want to spoil all your little peaks, but just drop a few little chunks of Wensleydale just in and around it. Have a little, a little play with it. Don't try not to squash it, but just Wensleydale doesn't melt and burn like other cheeses. It's a lot slower melting point. So, and then what we do, clean his hands. We have a little bit of pepper on top, because I love pepper. Right, and then that goes in the oven. And I've got that preheated at 200 degrees. That'll take about 30-35 minutes. Sometimes, in fact I will do it because my wife's going to tell me off if I don't do it. Put a baking tray, it on a baking tray, because what happens, inevitably, it'll bubble. And if it bubbles all over your oven, your wife's not happy, or your husband's not happy, or you're not happy about doing it yourself. So you want a middle oven, about 200 degrees, that's about gas mark 7, between gas mark 7 and gas mark 8. Remember, if you use gas, you need to spin it, because otherwise it's going to burn on one side. And give it about 30-35 minutes till it's lovely golden brown. And we'll get to that and we'll come back and look. But what I'm just going to quickly show you is just these other two that we've got here for your freezer. So we've just done all that there, so what we've got probably about another 3 or 4, 3 or 4 containers worth. But then there's a meal for 4 or 5, even 6 if you have small portions out of that one. So, like I say, you don't have to pipe it on these ones if you don't want to. You can just, what they call, like a shell pipe, if you want to do it like that. Or you can just simply zigzag it over. You can do whatever you want. And then what we do with that is we just let it go cold, completely cold. And then you freeze them, put your lid on and you freeze them. So what I'm going to do is, you join me in a couple of minutes, well, in 30 minutes, not for you on the super speed of the camera editing, but what we're going to do is, about 30 minutes time, we'll come back, we'll get it out of the oven and we'll have a look, see what we've got, and then, hopefully, we'll have a good success. It's the fun time, the best part of the day. We get to have a look and see what's going on in there. And see if we're ready to serve up. So if you want to come down to oven level, looking stunning, lovely and golden brown. You can see it's starting to bubble. It's just what we wanted. And you see how it's sealed the majority of that in because of how we've done the potatoes, and we've had the egg in it. It's put us like a little blanket on top. It's all lovely and crispy, bubbling away. Absolutely beautiful. So coming on to these ones. I've finished those ones up. Just different methods of piping to show you. We've sprinkled a bit of the cheese on. Now I've wrote out what they are, and like I say, just squash them down, fasten them up, and then that's it. They can freeze the last 6-7 months in freezer, no problem whatsoever. You can either get them out and defrost them day before or in the morning before you go to work. For kids, stick them in the oven and they'll take 20-25 minutes in there, and you can cook them all the way in that. Get a spoon, straight onto your plate. Lovely jubbly, easy as that. Give it a try. As you can see from looking at that, it's absolutely gorgeous. There's no way that people aren't going to be happy with that when they come down and sit down to eat the tea. Get a couple of Yorkshire puddings made, and you don't get much better than that. Glass of wine, perfect. You can even do that before you go to work or day before when you do these ones. Leave it in the fridge, even piped and everything. Take a bit longer because your mince will be cold, but I'll tell you what's a good tip, especially if you've got a gas or electric. These pots will take good heat underneath, so just put a steady heat on and then just start to heat up, underneath the mince, and then put them straight in a hot oven, and it'll take about 50 minutes. You'll have to turn it down a bit if it starts to colour, but give it a try and let's get cooking.